And we are live! Spoiler-free wrestling, it is 1:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And we are going to try and do as many of these videos from this time during the week as we can, just running through all the news that is making headlines in the world of professional wrestling today. I'm your host, Gentleman Ian from SpoilerFreeWrestling.com. And if you're new to these videos, here is what we plan on doing. We are going to go through everything that is making headlines in the world of professional wrestling, but I have taken out and omitted any information which could potentially spoil future storylines, angles, match results, or more for you. As an example of why we do this, if you had just been getting your news from SpoilerFreeWrestling.com and these videos, you would not have known ahead of time that Ronda Rousey was going to be in the Royal Rumble. You would have just enjoyed that surprise. You also would not know the main matches that are scheduled for WrestleMania, as spoilers about those are available everywhere. A lot of people find this type of wrestling coverage to be their preferred way to enjoy the shows. So if you appreciate this type of wrestling coverage, what with spoilers removed and what have you now, please click the like button, click the subscribe button, and share this video with anyone who you feel would also appreciate this style of wrestling coverage. All right, so I got a whole list full of wrestling news that we're going to go over today. We probably should start, however, with what took place on WWE Raw last night. Let me just get this up in the video thing for you here. All right, so last night on WWE Raw, it was sort of a big show for WWE. They've got Ronda Rousey back for the first time in nearly 3 years. Brock Lesnar was going to be on the show. It was the Royal Rumble Fallout show. So expecting a big rating. The television ratings haven't come in just yet today, but I'm expecting there to be a really big rating for this week's Raw. In the very first segment, we found out what's going on with Brock Lesnar for WrestleMania. Lesnar entered into the Royal Rumble on Saturday night as the number 30 participant. This is after he lost the WWE Championship to Bobby Lashley. So if you remember, Roman Reigns came out and hit Brock Lesnar with the title belt. This allowed Bobby Lashley to pin him. Bobby Lashley is now the champion. Brock Lesnar enters the Royal Rumble a la Becky Lynch from 2019. Remember, Becky Lynch did the same thing. Becky Lynch lost the title to Asuka at the Royal Rumble that year. So this is leading up to WrestleMania 35. She lost the title to Asuka, then entered the Royal Rumble, and then went on to, she faced Charlotte Flair and Ronda Rousey in a triple threat match in the WrestleMania 35 main event. So pretty similar to what she did. Brock Lesnar loses the title, then wins the Royal Rumble. He comes out in the very first segment and announces that he is going to face Roman Reigns for the Universal Championship at WrestleMania. Okay, no surprise there. They sort of hinted that that would be the case on the Royal Rumble show. But Brock Lesnar also announced that he will be going to the Elimination Chamber pay-per-view in Saudi Arabia on February 19th, and he's going to wrestle in the Elimination Chamber match. That match is going to be for the WWE Championship, and Lesnar said if he wins the WWE Championship on that show, he is going to go to WrestleMania and have a title versus title match. And if that's the case, if Brock Lesnar wins the WWE Championship in Saudi Arabia at the Elimination Chamber, and then goes on to have a title versus title match at WrestleMania, it would be the first time that we've gotten an undisputed champion in WWE since the summer of 2016, when they first introduced the Universal Championship. If you remember, Finn Balor won a tournament that culminated at SummerSlam. He then separated his shoulder or something along those lines. And that's the last time that we've had an undisputed champion in WWE. So the stage is set that we could get that again. We'll just have to see. Brock Lesnar in the Elimination Chamber match. So I thought that was cool. Not only did he announce he's facing Roman Reigns at WrestleMania, he also announced he's going to be in the Elimination Chamber. All right, in the chat we got Someone saying, when is Wyatt coming back to Raw? Hey, man, I'd like to see it too. There's not a lot to say about what's going on with Bray Wyatt right now. He's free and clear of his contract. He was filming a horror movie last year. I don't know how long that was going to go on for. In terms of where Wyatt ends up, there hasn't been any recent rumors about where he might, show up next. Could he possibly return to WWE? Yeah, he could possibly return to WWE. So basically, when Wyatt was fired, all these stories came out about what led to Wyatt's release. One of the biggest ones was that he had a really large contract. So if WWE is trying to reduce how much money they spend on talent, which clearly they were doing in 2021 because they fired 86 wrestlers, Bray Wyatt, if he's making, he was making 7 digits a year, is what's kind of rumored. That's not official, but it's believed that he was over the 1 million a year mark, maybe even a couple of million a year mark. So if you get rid of him, I mean, that's a big cost off your ledger, right? The other thing with Wyatt was there was reports that he was kind of very protective of his character and would kind of turn down creative things, which if you're Bray Wyatt, after that Hell in a Cell pay-per-view where everybody booed them, remember the Hell in a Cell they did in Sacramento? And it was Wyatt and Rollins in a Hell in a Cell match. Was it? Yeah. And everyone expected The Fiend to win the title, but then they ended it on a referee stoppage. The referee stopped it because Wyatt couldn't take any more punishment from the sledgehammer. But then despite that, Wyatt still came back and beat up Seth Rollins after. So it was just a mess. But anyway, the thing with Wyatt is he was costing a lot of money and he was protective of his character. So if WWE could reach out to Wyatt and kind of squash those two beefs, maybe get him in at a lower number and perhaps work with him on what the creative of his character is, I could see Bray Wyatt possibly returning to WWE. The fact that he hasn't shown up anywhere else when he is contractually free to do so, I think means, that could possibly be on the table. I don't think so. I've never heard any reports to suggest that. But certainly a lot of released superstars from WWE were contacted about being in the Royal Rumble, at least in the women's division. We'll get more on that later. But let's keep going with some of the news that took place on Raw. Another thing that happened on Raw, Ronda Rousey. So Ronda Rousey was in the last segment. And she comes out and she starts talking about being back, all this stuff. Becky Lynch comes out. Lynch starts talking about how that weirdo Ronnie would rather challenge Charlotte Flair. And so Ronda just gives her a judo toss and then says, I'll make my decision on Friday night. So on SmackDown. So that basically lets you know, hey, if you want to find out who Ronda Rousey's going to pick for WrestleMania, you've got to tune into SmackDown. And so Ronda will be on SmackDown this week as well, which should be very good for that show. It should get them a pretty big rating. But then some cool stuff happened after Ronda Rousey left the ring area. So she judo flips Becky, says, I'll let you know who I'm picking on Friday Night SmackDown. She leaves, and I'm thinking, all right, this show's over. I can go to bed. But no, I couldn't go to bed. Well, I could have. It was, I didn't need to go to bed. Lita comes out, and Lita challenges Becky Lynch to a Raw Women's title match at the Elimination Chamber in Saudi Arabia. Now, we had talked about this when Lita announced that she was coming back to WWE. Lita had actually negotiated with AEW in the fall about a potential return. Lita's not that old. She's 46, which is nothing in wrestler ages these days. People are wrestling into their 50s. So why wouldn't Lita come back at 46? So I think the idea is Lita's coming back for another run. Why not get one more run in there and wrestle some of the top women of the day? Lita is a big star. She's one of very few legends that are available in women's wrestling right now. Like, aside from Trish Stratus and Lita, who are women that you can point to and say, like, here is a legend of women's wrestling? That like could come in and do a match, you know. Lita and Trish have to be the two biggest. So to get Lita back for a period is huge for WWE. All right, we got a question in the chat about the Briscoe brothers in the Crockett Cup. Yeah, we're going to talk about the Crockett Cup. NWA is doing some really cool things right now. So the Crockett Cup is coming back in March. It's going to be a 2-day tournament that they're going to hold in the fairgrounds of Nashville. So that sort of famous building. And they haven't done the Crockett Cup since 2019 when Brody, King, and PCO won it. And they did it like a one-night show there. If you're not familiar, the Crockett Cup dates back to, they did it in 1986, 1987, and 1988. And there were very big events for, the National Wrestling Alliance back then, but it was really more Jim Crockett Productions and that organization within the NWA. Now, Billy Corgan owns the rights to all of that stuff, so why not bring it back if it was really popular, right? So the Briscoe brothers in the Crockett Cup, I would have to imagine that they're going to be in it. They are free to do whatever they want now. Sort of an interesting question is, why haven't we seen the Briscoe brothers on AEW? Like, the Briscoe brothers are one of the best tag teams of all time. And they're all of a sudden available to whoever wants them. But so far, it's just been GCW. Which is, and GCW's back at it this weekend. I'm not sure if the Briscoes are wrestling this weekend, but... So, I would expect the Briscoe brothers to show up in the NWA for the Crockett Cup, because the NWA is going to want to get all of the top available tag teams for that tournament. Well, if you don't reach out to the Briscoe brothers, then you're not really getting all of the top available tag teams that are available. So yes, to Certified Wrestling Podcast, I agree. Briscoes in the NWA Crockett Cup. Okay, so going back to more news that came out of Raw last night. So let's just run down the participants announced for the Elimination Chamber match, because this is kind of weird. And we're going to get into a news story that has some spoilers in it, but I will avoid those spoilers. So these are, if you're trying to avoid WrestleMania spoilers, you might not want to Google this. So in the Elimination Chamber match, we've got Bobby Lashley defending against Brock Lesnar. He announced that in the first segment. Later in the show, it was announced that Seth Rollins was also going to be in the Elimination Chamber. Austin Theory beat Kevin Owens in a qualifying match, so he'll be in the Elimination Chamber. Riddle defeated Otis in a qualifying match, so he'll be in the Elimination Chamber. And AJ Styles defeated Rey Mysterio in a qualifying match, so he'll be in the Elimination Chamber. But there's a bunch of weirdness that kind of comes out of this. Because... All right, let's start with the weirdness surrounding Shane McMahon. So Shane McMahon, there's all these stories that came out, and this one story was first reported by Ringside News. And they are a very controversial source, as I'm sure many of you know. However, this story with Shane McMahon has sort of been verified by Dave Meltzer. I think Fightful put something out about it as well. So the websites that get like their anonymous source information seem to be confirming this story about Shane McMahon. So I feel fairly comfortable that we can talk about it. So Shane McMahon was apparently one of the producers for the men's Royal Rumble match. I can't go into all of the stuff that he did because it's got spoilers in it, but evidently he wanted things to be booked a certain way. He wanted certain people featured. Those people wouldn't be featured. And this report from Ringside News, I'll just read what they said. They said, a tenured member of the creative team told us that Shane McMahon openly buried Jamie Noble and he tried to book the Rumble around himself. Furthermore, McMahon was confrontational, and he was gung-ho to put himself over, even fighting with people to do so. So there's multiple reports out there right now that Shane McMahon has ruffled some feathers. He's got backstage heat as a result of how he tried to produce the Men's Royal Rumble match. Shane McMahon doesn't really work backstage in WWE like that. He kind of comes in and seems like he does special projects. It's not really clear what or if he has a role backstage. But he was involved in the Royal Rumble match this year in terms of putting it together. And he also was the last 2 years. But this year he was said to be more hands-on than before. Also, leading up to the Royal Rumble, there had been all these reports out there that Shane McMahon was scheduled to be in the Elimination Chamber. Like he was going to wrestle in the Elimination Chamber match in Saudi Arabia. However, we get through Raw last night, and there's no mention of Shane McMahon. He's not in the Elimination Chamber match. He's not kind of featured on the show. So I wonder if WWE has just decided, all right, we need to scrap these plans involving Shane McMahon because of all this heat that he got at the Rumble. I don't know. This is all essentially just gossip. So-and-so is saying that Shane McMahon really got people upset. And, it's all coming from secondhand sources and things like that. So who knows what you can know. But, I think that's pretty interesting, those stories about Shane McMahon. Is it far-fetched? Okay, so this is from MadHop88. Is it too far-fetched that Shane booked himself strong? No, Shane has always booked himself. Like, he always books himself to do the crazy stunts, and so... No, I don't think it's far-fetched to believe at all that Shane McMahon would book himself strong or want to make him the centerpiece of the show. But it is interesting that Raw had nothing to do with Shane McMahon after Shane McMahon apparently, wanting to be a big deal in the Rumble and wanting to be in the Elimination Chamber as well. So, interesting stuff regarding Shane McMahon. So the other thing I wanted to talk about the Elimination Chamber participants, though, is Randy Orton. Something weird is going on with Randy Orton, but nobody knows what it is. So Orton, the Royal Rumble was in St. Louis. That's Orton's hometown. Orton was in the Rumble match a total of 2 minutes and 21 seconds. That's it. He entered in at number 29. Him and Riddle teamed up, and they eliminated Otis and Big E. And then Brock Lesnar tossed out Orton. So 2 minutes and 21 seconds, the Royal Rumble in his hometown in front of something like 40,000 fans. So that's a little weird, right? But they were kind of pressed up against time. If you notice, the show went off like immediately at midnight. So clearly they wanted to get the show done in a certain amount of time. So maybe they had to condense the ending of the match a little bit, and that's why Orton wasn't in there. But then Orton wasn't on Raw at all last night, and they didn't mention that he wasn't there, and they didn't explain his absence. Because that whole, I don't know if you watched Raw. I don't recommend it. But if you watched it, Orton was supposed to be involved in that scooter race thing with the Alpha Academy and Riddle. But he wasn't there, and Riddle just had his scooter race, against Chad Gable. And they, maybe I missed it, but I didn't hear them mention anything about why Orton wasn't there. And also, Riddle beats Otis and qualifies to go in the Elimination Chamber. And Randy Orton wasn't even given a chance to qualify for the Elimination Chamber. Plus, there's no talk of Riddle and Orton challenging for the Raw titles that they lost to the Alpha Academy. So what's going on with Randy Orton? There's just a few things not adding up. He's in the Rumble for only 2 minutes. He misses Raw the next night. He's not going to be in the Elimination Chamber, but his tag team partner is. Something's going on with Randy Orton. All right, let's see if we got anything in the chat. No? All right. Let's see what else we got going on. All right, the television ratings are in for SmackDown. And I am getting this from, what's this? This is from The Observer. I like, because they do the 10-week averages thing. Okay, so up on your screen now, These are the last 10 weeks of television ratings for WWE SmackDown. And so you can see, like, it set a big bump here in January. Now, okay, so it did a really good rating this week, and it did a really good rating last week. Those are the first 2 weeks in a long time that it hasn't had competition from Monday Night Football. So that plays into it. They did a great number in the key demographic that first week without football. You see they did a 0.64. So this week's episode, just a little bit down in total viewers and down 0.08 in the key demo, but still far and away, SmackDown is the most watched wrestling program in the world. No one's really coming too close to their ratings there on Fox. All right, let's see. But there are more television ratings coming in. We've got ratings for AEW Rampage as well. Rampage had a good week. Let me just do this in here. This is, again, from the Wrestling Observer site. They have some good detailed ratings. Okay, so it's up on your screen now. So they had 601,000 viewers, and their 10-week average is 535,500 viewers. So this was up. This was the best number that they've done in at least 10 weeks. In the key demographic, same thing, a 0.25. That's the best number that they've done in at least 10 weeks. So it was a good show for Rampage. So I don't know. There's a few different reasons why Rampage might have done well. I mean, SmackDown did well as well, right? So maybe it's just a case of I don't know what other sports competition was going on Friday night, but whatever it was, maybe it wasn't that big a deal. We are kind of like in a lull sports-wise because the NFL playoffs are essentially over. I mean, we got the Super Bowl in 2 weeks, but that's just one game, and there's nothing else going on that Sunday. So, I don't know. I guess we'll see. But that's a good number for Rampage, and it was a good number for SmackDown as well. There is also good news for Impact Wrestling in terms of television ratings, and that's something you don't hear a whole lot. Let's see what these... Okay, so Impact Wrestling did its best television ratings in close to a year, and this is from WrestleNomics. If that tweet would just load up, I'd really appreciate it. Okay, there it is. Brandon Thurston from WrestleNomics, which is, they're a good site to, like, if you really like business news as it concerns professional wrestling, you want to know how all the companies are doing, WrestleNomics is probably your go-to source for that. And it's generally all spoiler-free. They don't talk about angles and stuff like that. So Impact Wrestling last Thursday on Access drew 182,000 total viewers and is 0.05 in the key 18 to 49-year-old demographic. That's the best rating that they've done since February 16th, 2021. And so back on February 16th, that was when Kenny Omega hadn't won the Impact title yet, but he had taken the AEW World title to Impact Wrestling. Tony Khan was doing those ads every week. So it was during that period where they had Omega, they had Don Callis and Carl Anderson and Doc Gallows sort of as this faction that switches between Impact and AEW. So that was a really good time for them in terms of television ratings, in terms of pay-per-view buy rates, and it was coming off of their No Surrender show as well. So why is Impact Wrestling doing so well right now? Like, why are we seeing a bump in the ratings? Well, this show that did such good ratings for them was the first since Mickie James had been announced for the Royal Rumble. So one thought is a lot of people tuned in to see what Mickie James is up to. Like, because on their programming, on SmackDown, on Raw, to millions of people, WWE broadcast, hey, if you miss Mickie James, she's currently on Impact Wrestling where she's the champion. So if you like Mickie James, you should check out that show. That's a huge advertisement for Impact Wrestling. Like, it's not in the days where they were like mild competition for WWE. Those are past. Impact is, they're a show that gets, at best 180,000 viewers. They maybe get a few hundred to attend their tapings and their shows. They're not like they're not competition to WWE. So WWE's like, whatever, we don't care. And mentioning the Impact title and letting Mickey carry the title to the ring was part of her deal. So it's a great deal for Impact. They get all this advertising. They get the best numbers that they've done in a long time. And they just have to give up Mickie James for one night. It's pretty good. And apparently WWE had wanted the Iconics as well, who are now known as the Inspiration in Impact. And that would have worked out great too, because they're the Knockouts Tag Team Champions. So if they show up in the Rumble, that's even more advertising for Impact. But I think the Iconics were still a little too ticked that they had been released and weren't exactly interested in coming back. At least not for one night. Nia Jax was also asked about coming back to the Rumble. She revealed that on Renee Paquette's podcast that was released today. Lana was another one that they asked. So anyway, but good on Impact Wrestling. I do like Impacts. Sometimes there's things that bother me, but that's the case for almost all wrestling organizations. And then New Japan Pro Wrestling, which is back on Access TV. They did 66,000 viewers and a .01 in the key demographic. Now, an interesting point about New Japan getting back on Access. So New Japan apparently really wanted to get television in the United States because they have these New Japan Strong shows, which are on New Japan World. And they're sort of building a buzz around their New Japan USA division / like it's kind of its own promotion at this point. If you've been following it, that they've done some big shows. They did a show in San Jose. They did a show in Seattle, I want to say, recently. But they're good shows. And so New Japan won back on TV in the United States. But Access TV is now owned by the same company that owns Impact Wrestling. So they were like, if you want back on our channel, you have to work with Impact Wrestling. And so now we see guys from New Japan on Impact programming all the time. And it just makes the show better. Right now, Jonah is doing some cool things in Impact Wrestling. I really enjoyed Jonah. That's the former Bronson Reed. I'm just going to check on the chat. Okay. Who else? Oh, and they also have an angle going on in Impact Wrestling right now, featuring a bunch of guys from Ring of Honor. So Vincent, PCO, Mike Bennett, Matt Taven, and Maria Kanellis. They're known as the Honor No More stable, and they're like invading Impact. So then they have a show on February 19th, the same day as the Elimination Chamber. It's called No Surrender, and there's going to be a 5-on-5 tag team match with like Impact's top baby faces like Rich Swann, Eddie Edwards, Willie Mack, those guys, Chris Sabin, I think. They're going up against the Honor No More stable, and if the Honor No More stable can win, then they remain in Impact Wrestling. So I think Impact's just doing some cool stuff these days, and I think Mickie James helped get a lot more eyes on their show, and we'll just kind of see if that continues, like if they're able to keep those viewers. All right. Also going on that I wanted to talk about, Kofi Kingston released a statement about his, I'm not going to call it a botch, that sounds harsh, but well, that's what it was. It was a botch. So that is up on your screen now. I don't know if I zoom in, if it improves it for, oh, it does. So Kofi Kingston wrote, the past couple of days on social media, I've gotten a lot of, why would you think that was even possible? And why would you even try that? The answer to that question is quite easy. Because of the potential reward. What if you were to succeed in overcoming what is deemed impossible? The sense of accomplishment felt when you beat the odds and brazenly defy the probabilities is purely ecstatic. People's questions then morph into, how in the world did you do that? And I never thought that would be possible. But alas, it was not to be this time. However, even in failure, there is also a reward. One that may be more valuable than success. The reward is self-learning and growth. True strength. Failure forces you to take a look within and learn about yourself. Do you mope around and sulk? Do you hide and feel sorry for yourself? Maybe for a little while. I think that's natural. But then you use those emotions as a catalyst to push yourself and to drive yourself to be better. The castles of success are built in part from keystones of failure. Whew, he keeps going. Anyway, this isn't a cry for sympathetic messages in the comments or anything. LOL. I just saw this as a great opportunity to encourage people out there who might be on the fence about trying something because it's too risky or because they are afraid. Push yourself to try even when you know the risks. In my case, all the possible risks became a reality. Physical injury, the emotional weight of letting people down by literally falling short of delivering on their expectations, the risk of being laughed at and ridiculed for deciding to try the impossible. And still, if given another chance in choosing whether or not to make the attempt, I'd change nothing. No guts, no glory, no risk it, no biscuit. No pressure, no diamonds. You gotta bet it to get it, all the quotes. Many great rewards come to those who push the limits. So, Kofi Kingston I mean, how many different Royal Rumble spots has he done, and this was his first failure? Maybe he's done like 8, so he's 7 for 8? That's a pretty good ratio, I think. All right, let's see what else is in the news. All right, so AEW's Riho, the original or inaugural AEW Women's World Champion, she's out with a broken collarbone. And she's expected to be out about 3 months. And she suffered the injury during the Battle of the Belts match against Britt Baker. She finished the match, but yeah, broken collarbone. She's back in Japan to get treatment for the injury. She's going to be out about 3 months, and then she'll be back. So kind of cool, though. She had that big, long storyline with Britt Baker. So it would have been a blow if she couldn't finish that match, but she was able to do it. So gutsy performance from young Riho. We talked about this a little earlier. NWA announced the return of the Crockett Cup in 2022. The last time they held this was in 2019 when it was won by PCO and Brody King. And that was the first time that they had held the event in the modern era. The last time was in 1988. So that should be cool. We should see who is entered into that tournament. Another news bit. Mojo Rawley revealed in an Instagram video that he spent 19 months suffering with the impacts of a really bad case of COVID-19. And so he posted to Instagram. And so I was looking it up. He hasn't wrestled since June of 2020. So like a year and a half, right? And he was released in April last year. And so he posted this video onto Instagram, and he said, "I've been asked a ton about when I'm coming back to wrestling or if I'm officially retired. So let me go ahead and answer that now. About 19 months ago, I got COVID extremely badly. I had to go to the hospital. I almost died, and my lungs were just in really bad shape. So much so that in the beginning, I couldn't have any extra pressure on my lungs or else it would suffocate me. I couldn't even speak for days on end because I couldn't get enough air in to talk. Maybe the scariest part of the whole thing was the fact that the doctors had no idea what to say because it was so new. But fast forward 19 months later, and I'm not quite 100%, but I'm getting pretty close. My training has been kicked up, and I'm feeling good enough to announce officially that I'm coming back to wrestling, baby. COVID thought it got me, but it must have forgot I stay hyped." So the former Mojo Rawley, damn, that sucks. 19 months dealing with the impacts of COVID. That sucks. I got COVID, and I dealt with the effects of it for about 2 days. So I didn't enjoy those 2 days, though. So 19 months. Rough. That's rough. But good news, Mojo Rawley feeling good enough to come back to professional wrestling. And let's see what else we got. Oh, yeah, finally. And so this came out just after we did our show yesterday. And Lio Rush is alleging that he was taunted with racial slurs by fans at the PWG show. And just before we get, whenever there's a story like this, the first instinct is always to be like, okay, but it was just like a few people. Let's not paint every PWG fan with that brush because this happened. I've never been to a PWG show. I couldn't tell you what the fans are like. There were reports not long ago that there was some transphobic hecklers at a PWG show as well. So maybe there is a percentage of fans that are attending these events, which are maybe not the kind of fans you want attending your professional wrestling events. But Lio Rush, he was injured in that match. We talked about his injury on yesterday's show. He was wrestling Buddy Matthews, the former Buddy Murphy, and Buddy gave him a curb stomp, and it's not really sure wasn't sure at the time what his injury was, but he had to get taken to the ER, and so Lio Rush gave an update on his injury through this statement he released on social media, and here's what he said. Clean dislocation in my left shoulder, opposite to my previous shoulder injury. That's good. MRI in 2 to 3 weeks to hopefully find that there's no severe ligament damage tear. To all the boys in the back and crew at PWG last night that were super attentive and extremely helpful, thank you so much. More frustration and disappointment than anything else at the way last night ended. To all my fans and supporters, thank you for the outpouring of love and support. Saddened by the hate speech, racial slurs, and throwing of objects in the ring by quote-unquote fans who attended Night 2 of Bola. But nothing will diminish my love for this sport and stop me from performing for those who appreciate my craft. I will be back. See you soon. So that sucks. That's certainly no good that Lio Rush had that experience in PWG. But it doesn't sound like his shoulder injury is that bad. I was worried it was his, the shoulder that he had hurt before and that he, was out for a substantial amount of time with. All right, but the last thing that we should talk about before I get out of here for today, we got NXT tonight from the Performance Center in Orlando. 3 matches are announced. We've got Imperium. They are going to be taking on the Diamond Mine, so that's a 6-man action between Imperium and the Diamond Mine. And the newly named Gunther will be in action for Imperium. Raquel Gonzalez is taking on Cora Jade. That should be an interesting one. And NXT champion Braun Breaker will team up with the former NXT champion Tommaso Ciampa, and they'll take on the Legado del Fantasma team of Joaquin Wilde and Raul Mendoza. All right, that's going to do us for this video, guys. Thanks again. Thank you, people with questions in the chat. And we will be back here tomorrow, 1:30 p.m. as well. Once again, everyone, I'm Gentleman Ian for Spoiler Free Wrestling.